All right, hi everyone. This is Niall. Here's something I like to do. We're going to be talking about Excel here, and I like to put together quick little spreadsheets just to kind of practice stuff and demonstrate some features of Excel. So I want you all to do this along with me here. I'm going to fire up Excel. So go ahead and do the same. And here's Excel, and we're going to choose a new blank workbook, and we're going to mess around with some different functions today. So we talked about formulas before, but today we're going to talk about special kinds of formulas that are actually called functions, and you'll see what I mean in just a second here. So we need some dummy data first. I'm going to go down to cell A2, make that the active cell. I'm going to type in sales, and then I'm going to hit enter, and then type in overhead, and hit enter, and then I'm going to type in profits, hit enter, and then I'm going to type in year-to-date profits, hit enter, and then I'm going to enter percent change. Okay, so you can see that some of my um, um, words are overflowing in that column A. So what I can do here is put my cursor here and get these handlebars by the divider between column A and column B. And if I double click, it'll choose the best fit. So that's a good little trick to know about too. Okay, so over here in row 1, I'm gonna type in January, and then here's that cool little fill handle. And I'll get the fill handle here, and I'll just drag all the way over to, let's see, we want to go to July, so that would take us, I want to use the fill handle to copy that sequence all the way over to column H. So that will fill in the month names for me. And then in column I, I'm going to put total. And then I'm going to hit tab here because I want to enter, I want to move my active cell across instead of down. So I'll hit tab here to take me to J. And then I'll type in average. And then I'll hit tab again. And then I'll type in min. And I'll hit tab again and I'll type in max. Okay, so now we need some dummy data. So what we need to do is enter data in the cells from B2 all the way over to, let's see, I guess that would be H3. So we'll just go ahead and start entering data. I'm just kind of making this up. So I'm going to go 100, tab 110, tab 120, and I suppose I could use, whoops, I hit enter there. I meant to hit tab. And I'm going to go 130, and I could use that sequencing feature that I just showed you with the months a minute ago, but I'm just hardcore. I'm just entering these in 150, 160, and then I'm going to need some numbers for my overhead. So over here I'll go 95, and then I'll go 100, whoops, 100, tab, and then 105, tab, 110, tab, 115, tab, 120, tab, and 125. Okay, so there's our dummy data. So I think we're all set to get busy now. Couple things. We talked about formulas. So I'm going to enter a formula here in cell I2. So that's going to be our total sales for January, February, March, April, May, June, and July. So what I want to do is I want to put in a formula here that gives me the total of those sales for those months. So whenever I'm entering a formula, I can double click on the cell to make it the active cell, and then formulas always start with an equal sign. And then now what I could do here is I'm going to click on the first cell that I want included in the total, and then I could enter a plus sign. So I'm pressing the plus sign on the keyboard, and then I could click on the second cell and enter another plus sign. So you see how I'm building up this formula here. Click on the next cell that's going to be in our total and enter a plus sign. So I'm kind of using a combination of the mouse. I'm clicking on the cell and then I'm using the keyboard to enter the plus sign. And this is the way that Microsoft says you should enter your formulas, by using a combination of the keyboard and the mouse. And they say that's the way to avoid errors, the best way to avoid errors. So I got G2 in there. I need to put a plus sign in, and then I'll add July. Okay, so I think I'm done here. I'm just going to hit enter to finish it. So there you go. There's my total, 766. Now look at this. Here's my formula bar. When I've got the well, a couple things here. First of all, if you if you this is a formula here. So I'm just adding up cells basically. But there's a better way to do this. When you want to get a total, you can use what's called a function. And in this case, we want to use the sum function. So I'm going to erase all this right here, and I'm going to start over. So if we're using functions, they are a type of formula, so they need to start with the equal sign. So I've got my equal sign in the formula bar here. I could enter my function down here too in the cell itself. It doesn't matter. Either way is fine. But anyways, they start with equal signs. So what I want to use is the sum function. So I type in sum here. And functions usually, they usually have you enter values. And what we want to enter is the range that we'd like to sum up. So you write the function name, and then inside parentheses, you put the range that you want to use. So what I'm going to do here is I've got equal sum, and then I'm going to put the opening parentheses in place here. So you can see what I've got in the formula bar. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag through the range, click and drag through the range that I want to include in my sum here. So I'm going to press on cell B2 here, and I'm going to click and drag all the way through H2, just like that. And you can see what Excel did to my formula in the formula bar. It filled in that range for me. And then at this point, I'm done entering my range, so I can go back to the formula bar and put that closing parentheses in place. So this is what the final function is going to look like. So we use the equal sign, and then the function name, and then we usually put a range inside of parentheses after the function name. So you're going to have to get used to that, and that's just how these functions and formulas work. So once I get that in place, I can hit enter, and my function kicks in, so it looks like my total is 766. The other thing that I want to show you here is that if I go to a cell that has a function or a formula in it, and if I double click on it, it will highlight all the cells that are being used in that function. So this is a great way to check to make sure that you don't have that you're not missing a cell, or that you don't have too many cells included, because that can happen sometimes. So by double clicking on the cell, you can see what's selected for your function. Now sometimes when you do this, Excel gets kind of screwed up and it thinks you're gonna keep working on the formula even though I'm done with it. So sometimes if you'll see like marching ants appear, and you get kind of confused. If you're in the situation where you've got all these boxes that are shown here, and you can just hit the escape key, and that will turn all that stuff off. So sometimes you get caught in a situation where you're like, oh, I don't want to mess with my formula, but Excel seems to think that I'm trying to change my formula, and it's selecting all these cells that I didn't want. Just hit the escape key, and that'll exit you out of editing the function. Okay, there is actually another way to accomplish our goal here of getting the total sales for each of the months into this cell I2. I'm just going to go ahead and delete our formula in there now and start over. And this is the quickest way to do it. And this is called the auto sum button. So I can just click on the cell that I want to show the total, and then I'll click this auto sum button over here. And by doing that, Excel will guess what we want to use. So what it does is it looks for cells that have numbers to the left of the cell that were our active cell. And if it finds numbers there, it'll use those for the range in the sum function. Or in other cases, it'll look up too, because a lot of times you want your totals to total all the rows above the current row. So Excel does a pretty good job of predicting what we want to use when we use this auto sum button. So after you press the auto sum button, you have to press enter to finalize everything. So it's the same end result as what I showed you before. It's got the same formula in there. It's just a much quicker way to do it. You just tap on a cell. Whoops. Now here's what I'm talking about. I didn't want to edit this cell, but Excel thinks I'm still editing my formula, and I don't want to. So I'm just going to hit exit right here, and that should take everything back to the way it was before I started messing around with that cell that has the formula in it. Okay, so the auto sum button is a quick way to sum up a bunch of rows or cells. And once you've got a formula in place, you can actually, I've got the total sales here for January through July, but I also want to get the total overhead, our overhead costs too. So I can actually copy this formula down. What I'll do, because it's going to be the same formula, um, I'm basically using the sum function to sum up this row of cells this time. So I'm going to get the plus sign here, the fill handle it's called, by hovering in the lower right corner of cell I2. And then I'm just going to press and drag down to I3, and that will actually copy that formula um, down to I3 here. So you can see now the interesting thing is that Excel knew that I'm not totaling up row 2. It knows that it adjusts the formula for row 3. So up here you can see that um, we're trying to sum up B2 through H2, but whoops, and here's that situation again. I'm going to hit escape to get out of here because I'm not trying to mess with my formula, and I'm seeing those marching ants, so I'm just going to hit escape, and then I'm going to click off the cell, and now let's look at this formula in cell I2. So it updated the range. The one above it said B2 to H2, but Excel knows when you copy formulas that you want to copy them, the pattern really. So what we're really copying is the pattern of these cells that are directly to the left of the cell that has the total in it. We're going to talk more about that in another video when we'll be talking about absolute and relative cell references. So we just looked at that sum function, but there are a couple other functions that we'll be using. We can get an average. So I'm going to go ahead and click on J2 here, and I'm going to type in equals. And in this case, we're using a function called the average function. So I'm going to type in average like this, and then I'm going to put my opening parentheses in place. So keep your eyes on the formula bar. That's where you can really see what's going on here. And now I want to get the average um, for sales for January through July. So I set the table here with my formula. I got equals, my formula name, and then my opening parentheses. And now I can click and drag through the range that I want to get the average for. And now be careful because I don't want to include the total column here because that will mess up my average. So once I get the range selected, I'm going to go back into the formula bar here and enter the closing parentheses like that. And that puts my average in over here. And I'm going to copy that formula down doing the fill handle. So that will copy, this gives me my average expenses for those months here. And then likewise, I've got a min and a max function. So I'll put my cursor in cell K2 here. And then in the formula bar, I'll enter min, that's the name of this function, then my opening parentheses, and then I'll select my range. So I'm looking for the minimum sales for those months. And whoops, I got too many cells in my range there. So I'm just being careful not to include that total column because that will mess up my results. And once I get the range selected, I'm going to put my cursor back in the formula bar and put the closing parentheses in place. So now that gives me, it looks like in July, I think I was trying to enter 160 over here, but I entered 16. So that's showing up as my min here. But you know what? That was a mistake, and I'm going to fix that. So I'm going to put 160 in there, and you should see that all my formulas should automatically get updated when I make that change. And that is the beauty of Excel right there. So you can see that my min, after I corrected the error in my data, actually was the first month, January. All right, so I'm going to use the fill handle. I'm going to copy that formula down so that we can get the minimum overhead costs for those months, and it looks like it's 95. And then finally, there's a max function here too. So put your cursor in cell L2, and then type in equals, and then the formula that or the function that we're using is called max. So I type in max and then the opening parentheses, and I want to get a max for January through July, but careful not to include the total because that will mess up my results. And then once I get my range selected, I go back to the formula bar and I put the closing parentheses in place, and then I hit enter. So it looks like my max sales was 160, and that was in the month of July. And then I'm going to use the fill handle to copy that formula down so that I can get the max overhead costs too. All right, I think that's good enough for now. You'll be using these techniques in your assignment for next week.